Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day, and welcome to an updated tier list. Today, I'm going to be going over how the new PvP meta, whether it's gear set upgrades, or it's the whole turn-based thing in PvP, or whether it's even the Shadow Strike nerf, how do these affect all the schools differently, and how do the schools rank up now in 1v1 at Visionary? Without further ado, my mans, let's get right into it. Now, it's not that Storm has been affected that crazily by this change. If anything, things like Strike nerfs and turn-based effects, they affect every school fairly evenly. The real problem is that Storm has never really been that good at 1v1, and when you get rid of double reducing in Strike, they're not going to really rise much above where they already were. So things like Thunderbird, things like Rain Beetle, things like Rusalka, things like Queen Calypso, these are the main things that you could do in Strike to double reduce backlash, and now, because of the Strike nerf, you're guaranteed to take at least 10% backlash because you can't double reduce anymore. So the fact that Storm already has such little health, and the fact that their ability to do more damage through Strike is less efficient, that's kind of what puts them at this place. Now, this isn't to say that if you're a Storm, you're just going to lose every match that you do. Absolutely not. I think Storm has a definite place in the meta, and I think there's playstyles of Storm that could actually do really, really well. So Storm, it's not really a matter of they got screwed by this meta, this update. I don't think any of that's really a thing. I just think that the things that this meta rewards, which are minions, shielding, resist, dispels, and not Strike, the things that this meta rewards, it's just not things that go well with Storm. Let's move on to the number 6 school in the current PvP meta. Now, this is going to come as a huge surprise to a lot of people, but I genuinely believe that Fire is very low in this meta. I think Fire comes in at number 6. There's a debate. Maybe it could be number 5. As you'll see what's number 5. The reason why I say that Fire is much, much worse than it used to be is because of two things. One, Fire Beetle is now banned in PvP. That is a huge change for Fire. A lot of strategies that thrived on either going first or just, spamming Fire Beetle, whatever way you use Fire Beetle, you simply cannot use it anymore. Now, the only way you can still use a Fire Beetle is through having an item card, so you'll have a pet that has it. But because that's so rare, I'm just going to consider Fire as if they don't have it, and that's a huge, huge nerf to Fire. Now, the other thing is, Overtime's also got a very huge nerf. So when you get rid of the traps that Fire has had, I think Overtimes are also something that got nerfed because in turn-based, anyone can triage and anyone can shift. Sometimes it'll be effective, especially if your opponent isn't prepared. But if you're going against someone who's prepared for that scenario, you're not going to win that match with an overtime strategy. Again, this is not to say that Fire is bad by any means. In fact, I would argue that all the schools in this meta, besides Storm, are actually really fit to do really, really well. Fire is starting with a few extra obstacles. That being said, they're redeemed by a couple of things. One, their stats are great. Ifrit is still an extremely, extremely good move in turn-based. Even though you won't trick your opponent into using their pips on the -90, gaining that extra round and gaining that extra round of momentum in general is going to be a really, really big advantage. Not to mention, they are one of the schools that can use minions really, really well, and their minion's not bad. It can overtime, it can heal, it can mantle. I honestly think that this could even be inaccurate. I think number 6 is very low for Fire, but the main reason is because of the many nerfs that it got, and the fact that this is a more defensive meta. Shields matter a lot more, Strike got nerfed. These are things that disproportionately affect Fire, and that's why it's here on the tier list. Now let's move on to number 5. I think it's definitely debatable whether Death should be higher than Fire in this current meta. I think if you made the argument that Death and Fire were switched in this, I could totally see it. The reason why I think Death has just gotten the biggest buff you could have ever asked for is because turn-based completely favors any school that can control the match well. One, Beguile is a really, really good spell. Not only can it absolutely take a round of Strike, no matter what your opponent does, you can basically make it that so they can't hit you in strike. And since they're already risking at least 10% backlash, if you have a Dispel and a Beguile, there's a chance that you could make your opponent take a minimum of 30% backlash. Not to mention, when you do Beguile, the Beguile update, what it does is that it gives you a turn as well before it's their turn, so you almost get a double turn the way it works right now. So if I were to go against somebody, right, what I would do on a death is have a lot of resist, so that I would basically be forcing my opponent to strike to do a lot of damage. And then on that first strike, I could use spells like Virulent Plague, I could use spells like Beguile, and I could use spells like Dispel to control the match at a level that no other school can. Another combo that I think could work really well is a little Juju into a Scion action. I think that's a really, really powerful concept already, but now it's going to be really, really good. Another reason is I think Daybreaker Feint is only really usable by death, and I think Daybreaker Feint, think about it, you could literally, if you're in Strike, you could Daybreaker Feint, and it's a crazy move. So they have some really nice tools in Strike, they have some really good tools against Strike. That's why Death is up there. The only reason Death isn't higher is because their minion game is super weak, and minions are very useful in this meta. So, number 5, number 6, I think number 5. Let's move on to number 4, my man. At the middle of this list is going to be Myth at number 4. Now, this one's, I think, really straightforward. They have a solid set of strengths in this meta and a solid set of weaknesses in this meta. I think all of the schools should be balanced in that way, if you ask me, because I think Fire and Storm, as we have noted, have gotten not the best end of the deal, and we'll talk about who's gotten a really good end of the deal. I think Myth has really good minion game. They got some cool Daybreaker plays and double hits that are really good in this meta. That's really great. They tend to have lower resist, they tend to have lower health, they don't have that good of a heal, so, you know, I think it's pretty simple. Those 3 strengths kind of cancel out by the 3 weaknesses. That's really all there is to say. I think Myth is in a better place now than it's been in a while, in my opinion. I think you can control a lot of games in your favor. I just don't think it's overwhelmingly good or bad. I will say, though, I think minions are really good in this meta, and the minion school can do really well with that strategy. It's just not everyone's just gonna spam minions all the time. Myth comes with 3 real good strengths and 3 pretty solid pitfalls. It's in the middle of this list. Let's move on. Coming in at number 3, I gotta show my balance wizards some love, y'all. I think balance is almost at a perfect place in the meta right now. I think it's right around the middle, which is really good. It shouldn't be dominating, but I think with a certain level of creativity, you should be able to get circumstances in your favor. So the fact that it's number 3 or 4 on this list, I think it's a good place for balance. Out of all the schools, I would argue they have the most tools that are benefited in this meta. Their minion game is really good, especially if you have the Clockwork minion. You can heal very well. I mean, the only one that can heal better is obviously Life. Balance also has diffuses. Now, the reason diffuses are so good is because if you have enough resist to the point where Strike becomes very necessary, you can literally diffuse spam. And the way diffuse works right now is that if you use it, then basically it only creates 1 Dispel shield. So let's say you're going against a Storm and they Shrike. You could theoretically triple diffuse them, and the only Dispel that they won't get is the Fire, because it breaks the Dispel shield. And if you're really going against a Fire, what you could theoretically do is Elemental Diffuse, and then Balance Diffuse, or Balance Dispel, break the Dispel shield, and then diffuse them again. So there are a lot of strategies that you can do. I would argue that to make balance really work, you're gonna want Pip Conserve so that your mana burns aren't as awful as they seem, because mana burn is a huge nerf. The only reason balance isn't all the way at the top is because of the mana burn nerf. They did nerf mana burn, so because you can always know how many pips your opponent's gonna have. There's no real risk to it. Your opponent can't predict a mana burn and then use their pips anymore, so I do understand why it might have gotten nerfed. But that's the only real bad thing. I think their minion game is excellent, their healing game is great, their diffusing game is wonderful, there are strategies like Nova that are going to put them above. I think Supernova is really good in this meta. Anything that does a lot of damage for a few pips, like, you're going to need that. As a final note, I think while some schools did get a little bit of a nerf, because, you know, you can't double reduce in Strike, I guess that balance can't double reduce with Gaze anymore. But if you Gaze in Shrike, it is so good. For the same reason I was mentioning about Myth having double hits and it being really good, Balance also has a double hit, and not only does it double hit, it also gives a bubble. So this spell alone is really much better. It gives you bubble control and it gives you a way to go around shields. It's so good in this meta. Just this spell alone puts Balance really above Myth, and I think that's just my opinion, I guess, but I think Balance is going to do really well in this meta. Let's move on to number 2. I think if you're an Ice Wizard, this update only helps you win more games. Like, it's like, if you look at the stats that I have, just look at them, right? 130 damage, 62 resist, all this health. All you really have to do is control the match with minions so that they can break the shields that are in your way. And if God forbid your opponent decides to tower shield, you can just steal wards so easily. Like, minions and steal ward themselves give Ice a huge benefit, but also when they do get bubble control, it's a really good bubble. So things like bubble control, minions, decent utilities that work really well in turn-based, these are some of the main reasons why Ice is good. I think, honestly, the reason Ice is so good is just Abominable. You can hit and you have a minus 75 shield. That's a really powerful tool in this meta. Sure, you can't double reduce in Shrike with Ice Bird anymore, but honestly, if you can weather down your opponent, the only real thing they can do is try to kill you before you kill them, and your resistant health make that a very hard job. It's always been a good meta for Ice, I guess, so it's not really like Ice has changed that much. But what I'm about to talk about is the biggest change. Number 1 on the list is almost certainly going to be Life. I think Life has some of the best stats and options for this meta. And when I'm talking about this meta, I'm talking about a meta that favors heals a ton, favors high resist a ton, favors things like block that Life can get a lot more easily than other schools. The only other school being able to do it better than is Ice. And just the fact that their minions aren't even that bad either. Their bubble control options are a little bit iffy, and that's, I guess, their one big weakness. If you're going against a Life, bubble control is very important, and that's a built-in weakness. They got so many bubbles, but none of them are for 2 pips. I do think there are going to be some schools that can counter them, like Death, very well. But besides Death, I just don't think any other schools are going to be that good against Life. The fact that you can recover so easily and with so little consequence, I just think it makes Life really good in this meta. I hope that we see more interesting games on my Life Wizard. I don't know. I do think Life, because of their recovery options, is by far the best suited for this meta. But then again, that's just my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed my reasoning. I'm sure there's a lot of things that I've definitely missed out on. There could be gear sets that make some schools extremely good that I haven't even looked at. I think it's a pretty decent overall, like, you know, look into the PvP meta right now. So let me know what you guys think. What strategies are you guys gonna try? As always, drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my Twitch, my Twitter, my Discord, my Instagram, and my Patreon. Thank you for the monthly support on Patreon. As always, if somebody has not told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong, so stay awesome. And yeah, yo.